Hi, my name is Justin Melson and I create all the content on the Happy Fox Productions YouTube channel. And welcome to part 2 of how to achieve cinematic color grading for your films. In this video, we'll be going over different color grading softwares, my own personal workflow, and the essential elements and key terms that you need to know when color grading your films. So let's jump in and get started. Okay guys, I'm just going to jump right into it. The program that I'm using right now is Sony Vegas Pro 12. So first things first that we have to learn how to do is to set up your project correctly. That means matching your project settings to what you were filming on set or location. So I've had a few friends ask me how to do that and they get confused because a lot of it deals with numbers, and it's really simple once you get used to it and once you know what those numbers mean. So once I'm done with Sony Vegas, I'm going to hop onto Premiere Pro and go into Adobe SpeedGrade and we'll take it from there. So first off, we need to go into this button right here, which is Project Video Properties. And as you can see, we're shooting with internet, 480p, 30 frames per second, 4:3. You know, if this was 2008, that would be good for YouTube, but not now. I mean, we have like 4K on YouTube. So you can do everything manually. You can change your numbers manually. You can choose your field order, all that good stuff manually. Or if you already know what footage you're going to be dropping into your project, you can just straight up drop that onto your timeline. So let's say I want to take clip number 3, just click and drag it, and it will do it all for me. So that means this was shot on the Blackmagic cinema camera in 1080p, 24 frames per second, Apple ProRes 422. And if we go here, it's all done for me. 1080p, field order is blank, but essentially that's none, progressive. Square aspect ratio, 24 frames per second. So what that means is I shot at a non-drop frame, just straight 24 frames per second. Most DSLRs like the EOS T2i, 70D, most DSLRs in general shoot at 23.976, which has a drop frame. But for me, I shot at 24 because I can. And pixel format, this does shoot in 10-bit color space, but Sony Vegas doesn't have a 10-bit option, so you could choose 32-bit floating point. But for the sake of this tutorial and for my computer, I'm going to choose 8-bit, click apply, and OK. First things first, I've also had a few people ask me how I get those color bars on the top and bottom of the screen to get that anamorphic aspect ratio. And, you know, me and most other independent filmmakers can't afford, you know, anamorphic lenses and all that good stuff. So generally what I do is I go here and I already have a preset that I made called 2.351 AR aspect ratio, and I click that and it does it for me. And this isn't even mathematically correct. What I do is I just take this and I just kind of choose what I feel like looks like anamorphic, which is about right there. Click that and then I just name it and then hit save, and then honestly I would just do that for every single shot. But I don't use Sony Vegas anymore, so I have a different method, which I'll explain in a second. So for all you Sony Vegas users out there, if you want to do some basic color correction, color grading, first of all, you can just go here and you have all these different options that you can choose from. When I did use Sony Vegas, the first things first that I would use was Sony Color Curves, which is your basic color correcting tool, color corrector, 3-way color corrector, color balance, brightness and contrast, and black and white. So once we have all these selected, you have all these tools, and I'm just going to turn that off for now. All these tools that you can use from, and I'm not going to go over all of them because this tutorial is mainly going to be in Adobe and Adobe SpeedGrade, but I'll just give you a gist of this. So, curves. If you are really talented enough, and I'm not saying I am because I'm also a beginner at this, you can almost accomplish any look just using curves. And I read that using David Lindbergh's post in his blog page on Facebook. I'll post the link to that in the description. But so look, you can raise the shadows and lower the shadows, raise the highlights, lower the highlights. But essentially you can manipulate all your colors within this tool. You have your RGB, your red, green, and blue, etc. So let's say we want to add some contrast. You can raise the highlights, lower the shadows, and you're making extreme contrast in your image. Let's say you want to turn the gamma down a little bit. You can also do that in your midtones. If you're going for that look, even raise the shadows, etc. Color corrector, essentially 3-way color corrector. You can, you know, put some blues in your shadows and have your highlights, which would be these white parts right here. Make them yellow if you're going for that kind of look. boost the saturation or have there be no saturation, etc. Color balance, brightness and contrast, and black and white essentially is just desaturating your image, just like that. But let's say we don't want to do any of this and you actually have a plugin for this. Let's say we have Magic Bullet Looks, which is a bit of an expensive plugin. It's about $400 for the full license and $200 for the academic license. So if you're willing to drop that kind of cash, this is a really good plugin, although I don't really use it too much. So if you click Edit, it'll bring us right into Magic Bullet Looks. And as you can see right off the bat, we have a giant frame for us to view. You have all your tools, you have your zoom, you have all this kind of information, metadata, everything here at your disposal. And you also have a bunch of custom made looks that you can choose from. You have action, indie, zombies, romance, etc. Although I really wouldn't recommend using all these because I've seen about 50 videos on Facebook that have already used all these, like Blockbuster is so popular, and Epic. So I would honestly go about creating your own presets. And again, keep in mind these are presets. These don't just go to your video. They're just made to drop onto any video and make them look that way. They aren't specifically made for your video. So keep that in mind. But let's say you do not want this at all. You can just go to File, New Look, and bam. Here's where the real fun comes in. You go to Tools, and you have all these different options that you can use to manipulate your image. Let's say you want to go into Camera, go to Exposure, drop that on. And look, you can't legitimately change your exposure because this isn't RAW, this is ProRes, but you can, manipulate your exposure a little bit within the computer. You have so many things, spot exposure, grade exposure. I mean, honestly, I can't go through all of these and tell you what they each do, but of course, that's definitely for you to explore. Of course, curves that we just went through, and etc. So let's say we do a quick grade. Let's see what we want to do. Add some saturation. So let's say we do a giant grade, and we click Finished, and voila, it is already in your shot, ready to go. But that is enough about Sony Vegas. Let's get out of here. So now we're in Adobe Premiere Pro. And this is what I use for my main color grading software. Actually, Adobe Creative Cloud in general. I use Adobe SpeedGrade, and that is honestly one of the best color grading tools I've ever used. And one of the only color grading tools I've ever used. So let's say we want to do the same thing we did in Sony Vegas. Let's say you want to create a new sequence and you want to have your settings matched and all that good stuff. You could just take your clip and drop it into here, and that'll create a new sequence for you. Boom, you have your sequence ready to go. Or you can also go to Sequence, Sequence Settings, and do it all here. Now, if I want to create the aspect ratio bars in Adobe Premiere Pro, I have two ways to do that. One is I have CinemaScope right here. I just take that, drop that in here, and this is a PNG file, so it's transparent, it has an alpha channel. So it's automatically dropped on and it's covering my whole project. So I don't have to do it for each shot like I had to in Sony Vegas all those years. And also, you can just choose your size. Oh, let's say I want to get his head in there a little bit. There we go. You're all good to go. And let's say you want to have the cinematic 2351 aspect ratio, but you don't want to do it this way. You don't want to have something covering your video. You want to actually do it mathematically. So to do it mathematically, it is pretty simple. What you have to do is you have to take your project, which this is 1080p 1920 by 1080. So you take 1920 divided by 2.35.1, and that gives you 816. So we go into sequence settings, and then we take this and type in 816, hit OK, and OK, and you can't see it now, but our project is in CinemaScope right here. If you look at it, it is there. So if we just do this, create a new sequence, yada yada, then we go back here, there you go. Your project is mathematically in 2351 aspect ratio. Instead of adding the bars, you can just do it mathematically. But me personally, I don't like doing this because I like to be able to see what I'm cropping and what's being cropped out of my image. So I am going to change it back. So let's say you want to do some pretty awesome color grading inside Premiere Pro. Well, we can go to Video Effects, Color Correction, and here you go, have all these built-in tools inside of Premiere Pro. And obviously the best one that you want to use, and the first one you want to use, is your RGB curves, because you have an infinite amount of possibilities and different amount of looks that you can create from this tool. So first let's go over what this means. So this bottom part equals your shadows or your low points in your image. If you move this over, you'll start to crush your shadows, as you can see. And the opposite is the same thing for your highlights. Move this over and you'll start to crush your highlights. And obviously this is your midtones, which is also known as gamma range. So you're sort of adjusting your midtones, aka gamma, in your shot. And essentially that's the same thing for your red, green, and blue channels. If you want it to be more Western, take out some of the blues and you're already getting that sort of Western look. But remember, this is film log footage from the Blackmagic cinema camera. So this is very flat, very mushy looking, and you have to do all the work yourself. So let's start to taste up this image a little bit. So what I like to use is a software called Film Convert Pro. So I drop that on there, and already you can see this is a film emulation software. So what that means is it's not specifically made for color correction. As you can see, there's only so many color correction tools that are here. You have your 3-way color corrector and your levels, and that is about it. But it is meant to emulate film in different film style, film stocks, etc. So let's say if we want to choose Blackmagic Design Film, click that. And as you can see, it already adds saturation, it adds contrast, almost like you were recording in Rec 709 color space. So now we can go into film settings, and we have all these settings. We can choose the grain, curve, film color, etc. But generally, I like to start with my film grain at 0 and add it later. Let's see what else. Let's see what film stock we like. I know I like this one a lot. And there's a bunch of different ones you can choose from. Let's say I want to go for that desaturated look. Just bring down the saturation. By the way, if you guys want to know what saturation is, I don't have a correct term for it, but it's how poppy your colors are, how much your colors are going to pop out in the image. If we move this all the way up to 200, our colors are going to be way too colorful. As you can see, it's way too orange, way too red, way too blue. You know, as pans, that's an abnormal. You really don't want that much saturation. So let's say we bring this down to 75, get a nice desaturated look while we're still getting some colors, so we're getting a filmish kind of look to it. Okay, now we have exposure and temperature right here. Temperature is essentially your white balance, although this isn't raw, so you can only adjust this too much. This is essentially like the look of your image. If you want it to be cool, or if you want it to be even warmer, etc. And if you want this to look a little bit more overcast, let's do -0.1. It's going to darken down your image a little bit. You can go into your shadows, make them a little bit bluer, bring them down just a touch. Midtones, let's bring it a little bit bluer as well. Highlights. And then you can also bring up your highlights also. You have to be a little careful though. Midtones, bring that down. Let's actually bring this back up to 0. Let's bring the midtones back down. And we can also go into our graph right here. We can adjust our sliders, making it a little bit darker. We can crush the shadows a little bit more. Erase the highlights. You get what I'm saying. This is a very contrasted shot compared to the original. If we look at the original to now, huge difference. And it looks fairly decent, although I wouldn't call this a completed grade. This is just for the sake of the tutorial. And then afterwards, if you want to add some sharpening, you can go to Unsharp Mask or Sharpen. And I'll generally put this at about 8, because you don't want to sharpen it too much or else you'll get some weird artifacts in your footage. Okay, so that is looking pretty decent. So we have a new shot with my girlfriend Alexis right here. This is just fun footage that we filmed at a park one day. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find an in and out point of a cool part that looks pretty cool with the sun. I don't know, let's just take this part. Okay, so we have this. We have this footage. So let's grab that. Let's grab multiple different cameras and different kind of scenarios. So when we take it into SpeedGrade, we know how to grade different scenarios. So we have a shot overcast in the day, another pretty sunny shot. Let's go into the script. This is an old film that nobody saw because it never got finished. Drop that here. This is T2I footage, so this will be 8-bit H.264 footage. And here's another shot that deals with visual effects. So I'll drop this on here, and I'll just keep it at that for now. Or let's bring in, let's see if there's another shot we want to bring in. Project Ed. If you guys saw this video, it's on my channel. This video was extremely hard to expose for because I don't have any ND filters, so a lot of the highlights are crushed very badly. Alright, let's bring in this shot too. We might not get to it, but oh well. So this is my friend Dylan. He is on top of a car. Okay, so we have, I'm just going to mute these. We have all of these shots right here. Here's Mr. Rich and our friend Chelsea, or my girlfriend's cousin Chelsea. Alexis right there. My friend Dylan. Again, this is shot on the Canon T2I. And as you can tell by the lack of dynamic range, because it is exposing, it is clipping a lot more over there. And if you look on his shirt and on the door, it is clipping a lot more. So as he walks, we have a very overexposed, blown out sky due to the sun being right there, casting a shadow. And again, T2I footage. And this is our Blackmagic cinema camera footage. So as you can see, it is clipping a lot on his forehead, but it is rolling off in a much smoother kind of way. So that's going to help us when it comes to grading. We have these 3 shots, so what we're going to do now is we're going to dynamic link into SpeedGrade. So how to do that is we go to File, I forgot, oh my gosh, direct link to Adobe SpeedGrade. And you want to save, of course, and it's going to take us to Adobe SpeedGrade. Another helpful hint is always save before you dynamic link anywhere or you render anything, all that kind of stuff, because there's been way too many times where I try and dynamic link into After Effects or Audition or anything, or I want to render out my video and it crashes during the process and I hadn't saved in about an hour, and that's an hour worth of editing that you just lost. So always save before you render, always save before you dynamic link to another program. It's like wearing a seatbelt. Always wear a seatbelt when you drive from point A to point B. Always save when you go to point A to point B. Perfect explanation. Boom. I deserve an Oscar. Just kidding. Even though Leo doesn't have an Oscar, so that makes me as good as him. We both don't have Oscars. Okay, so now we're in Adobe SpeedGrade, and here is the professional grading system that I use. So we have the first shot, the second shot right here, and you can tell by the different cameras because it says Blackmagic Cinema, MVI, which is my QuickTime T2I, and we're dealing with multiple codecs, so my computer might be lagging just a little bit. So we go here to the first shot, second shot, and the third shot. And SpeedGrade is a really, really easy, simple software to get used to. I literally figured out how to use it in about 30 minutes. And I've only been using this for about a couple months, so there's that. When you open up your SpeedGrade, if you haven't opened it up before, you're going to get something that looks like this. And since we're being dynamic linked from Premiere Pro to here, it's very simple. Once you do all your grading, what you do is you would just click that, you would dynamic link all your information back into Premiere Pro, and it is just awesome. So let's start off with this shot, and let's go over what all these tools mean. So, obvious contrast, that means how contrasted your scene is, essentially how dark your darks are and how light your lights are, or how bright your brightness. Oh my god, you know what, just ignore me. But essentially that's what it means. Your saturation, that means how poppy or how colorful your colors are. Magentas, that's dealing with different magenta tones in your image. Your color temperature, it's almost like your white balance, but think of it like you're adjusting the temperature in your shot. Your pivot and your input saturation. And think of these as your 3-way color corrector. So this would be your gain, as in the whites of your image, the gamma, the midtones of your image, and the offset. That affects your overall image, but it does it in a more extreme way. So if I bring this down, as you can tell, just by bringing it down a little bit, I really messed with my image. So I'm going to reset that, And let's start grading this shot. So overall, I want to add some contrast because this is very, very uncontrasted. And in fact, let me go in the midtones and add some more contrast. I really want to do that. And a helpful tip is if you're trying to adjust these sliders, they're going too slow and you want to go faster, hold shift and adjust them and they move a lot faster. So we go back into overall. Maybe I want to bring down the gamma just a little bit. Bring the temperature. Let's see, what kind of mood are we going for? This was a really bright day, so let's give it a warmer kind of look. Maybe saturation in the midtones, we could bring that up. And then bring saturation overall. Actually, oh, I'm sorry. That's still the midtones. Overall, bring that down just a little bit. Now, in the gain, if we want to give it that overcast look, we could bring the gain down, but we could just bring this up. Now, in the midtones, we can make it a little bit blue. Let's give it a little bit more warmth to it. Now shadows, there aren't a lot of shadows in the shot, mainly on her leg and underneath the pier, or not this pier, but this little dock right here. So let's say shadows, we want to make this a little bit bluer to a point where you guys are going to notice it's really blue. Then I could just bring down the saturation a bunch. Maybe I'm going to reset that, just make it a little blue. Awesome. Highlights, this is going to be dealing with the highlights of her shirt. So let's say we want to bring that down a little bit so everything's not so blown out looking. We can open up our scopes to see what's going on. Obviously, this shot is very red. It's really orangish red. The blues are down the most because I took out a lot of the blues. But overall, we are clipping a little bit in the reds. So let's see how we can fix that. I'm going to go into my gamma, the midtones. Just bring that down a little bit. That's going to bring it down in here. But the highlights, again, we can just move this down a little bit. And let's see. That is looking meh. It's looking kind of okay. And let's remember, before you guys actually start your grading, it's best to go into your tools and adjust all your preferences based on your computer. For me, when I'm paused, I'm at 1/4 quality. I mean, when I'm playing, I'm at 1/4, and when I'm paused, I'm at 1 to 2 compression, and that's 1 to 4 compression. So everything looks pretty good. You guys just have to go through and figure out all your different, basically what works for your computer and your best preferences for your own machine. So this is looking kind of okay. We can adjust the input saturation, make it a lot more saturated. Maybe just give the overall scene a cooler look. That's a little bit too extreme. Let's just bring it down a little bit. Bring down saturation some more. Highlights, make them a little bit oranger. Bring that down. And then this is our primary color correction, or color grading, sorry. We can go into our secondary and add more color grading to it, but I really don't want to do that. I'll just add another primary and just add another, you could call it a pass, just add another pass over it. So if I want to bring the saturation down some more, if I want to, let's see, bring up the gamma for some reason, but we can just keep it there. This is looking along pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and move on to another shot. So this shot is more extreme. As you can tell, we are definitely clipping right here. And that is a no-no. Even though this camera has 13 stops of dynamic range, you're still going to clip because this is pure white. The ground was pure white and it's a really hot day outside, so no matter what, it was going to be clipping. So we can just, there's nothing we can do about that, honestly. If we shot raw, we could have recovered some of that detail, but I didn't shoot raw, I shot ProRes. So you're gonna have to deal with it. So first things first, I'm gonna add some contrast to the shot. In the midtones, bring up some more contrast so we can see some more detail. I'm actually gonna go here. I actually wanna see some more detail. So when I'm paused, I wanna have 1-to-1 compression. Hit close, so now I'm getting more detail. I can see a lot more that's going on. Midtones, I wanna make this a really warm looking shot. Not like a dream, but just a really, really warm looking shot. Input saturation, I can bring this up. Actually, bring that down a little bit. Final saturation, bring that up. So you can tell things are looking really warm, and of course we are clipping badly in her hair, on the floor. Things are just, it's a mess, but there's not too much we can do about that because that is how it was filmed. Bring the temperature down and the shadows. It's a little bit too much. Just desaturate that a touch. If you want, you can bring down the shadows some more. If you want to bring up the shadows, that is also doable. Bring down the shadows, add some contrast in the shadows. The great thing about Adobe SpeedGrade is everything that you can do in overall, you can do in your shadows, in your midtones, and your highlights. So if you want to add some more saturation in just your shadows, you can do that. If you want to take out saturation in your shadows or your highlights, of course you can do that. You know what, since we are already overexposed, let's just give this a really overexposed, dreamy look. We just want to, you know, we don't want the audience to know we messed up. We didn't bring a light meter, so let's just play it off with some color grading. And now if we just want to completely just dim the highlights in our complete shot, we can move this down and watch the scopes as we do that. See, we're gaining more detail, and we're slightly starting to gain more detail while we do that. If we do that in overall as well, we're not gaining any more detail, we're just dimming what's already blown out to 100%. So we can just, you know, create a really stylistic look. So this shot's looking pretty good. Let's move on to another shot, and then I'll wrap up this tutorial for you guys. Here's a shot. Let's study the shot. We have highlights, we have highlights, shadows, and of course our mid-tone spectrum. If we look on our scope, everything is looking how we assumed. None of our shadows are crushed. We have pretty decent midtones, and of course our highlights are looking great until they get to the sun, where it's of course going to crush, and that's exactly what you'd expect. So let's treat this shot accordingly. We can go to overall, maybe take out some saturation, because since this isn't Blackmagic design film, this is already pretty saturated. So I'm going to bring down the gamma a little bit, make this a little bit more stylistic looking. Go into the midtones and add some contrast. And let's make this also, let's make this cooler. Shadows, gonna make the shadows a little bit, just a little cool. Bring that down. Then we can go into our highlights and make that a little bit warmer, or we can make it cooler, but I feel like since it's a sun, it should be warm. Bring the overall temperature down though. This is going to be a really unique shot. We're trying to make it cool while at the same time making the sun warm. So highlights, make it warm. And a lot of this is just trial and error, doing what you think looks best for your own film. I'm just doing this off of my head. And don't trust everything I do in this video, because I am partially colorblind. And, you know, if you watch me too much, you might get partially colorblind too. You don't want that. Everything's looking good. Add some contrast to the shadows. Maybe dim the shadows down a little bit. As you can tell, they're going down. And if we play it back, the door opens. Maybe go into the midtones, bring that back down. We want this shot to be overall pretty dark and gloomy. That's about that. So let's say we are all done with our grading and we want to take this back into Premiere Pro. Well, how do we do that, you may ask? It is very, very simple, and this is why I love Adobe products so much. You just click this little Adobe button right here, direct link to Adobe Premiere Pro, save changes, click yes, and just let Adobe do its magic. And boom, it is back into Adobe Premiere Pro. And look at this. Everything that we did grading wise is now in Premiere Pro. And it imported it as a simple Lumetri look file. So we can easily toggle it on and off to see before and after. It's very, very convenient. So if we look at this shot, we can look at before, after. If we go here, we can look at after, before, before, after. So everything in Adobe Premiere is just very, very It's just a very nice workflow for you to have. And not to mention, you can easily just right click, and if you have visual effects, replace it with an After Effects composition and start knocking out your VFX. Although I would suggest that you would just not do your color grading first. I would suggest that you do your visual effects and then your color grading. What I would do is you would do your editorial, you would cut all your footage without any color correction, and then you would do all your visual effects on top of your edit. And then once that's all done, mix your sound, and once your sound's all done, throw in your color correction and your color grading, and then do your final render. And that is how my workflow is. But I like to tell myself that, but generally that's not how it goes. I end up doing color correction while I edit, because I just like to see how it's going to look. But generally it's temp color correction, it's not the final thing. So let's say your sequence is all done and you're ready to render. So what should you do? Well, first you should set your in and out point. So just hit I for in, and just zoom in here. Hit O for out, zoom out, go to File, Export, Media. And this all goes into how you want to export your video. I'm going to go into more detail on this in part 3, but I'm just going to run through it really quickly so you guys have an idea. So if you want to export for the web, you can go to H.264, and you can you can essentially just hit match source, but you want to make sure everything's okay. So 1080p, 24 frames per second, progressive, aspect ratio square. If you're shooting in 480p, you want to have your aspect ratio be at 1.212, 1.2121. If you're in North America, NTSC. If you're in the UK or Europe, PAL. Main, 4:1. If you want the best quality, render at maximum depth. And here is where it really counts. So if you want a constant bitrate, just click constant bitrate, and your bitrate is going to be at whatever you set it the whole time. So if you want it to be at 16 megabytes per second, then it'll be at 16 megabytes per second the whole video. But if you wanted to do 2-pass, this means it's going to run through your video twice. So it's going to render your video all the way through once, and then it's going to render it through all the way again to make sure you get the maximum quality. So essentially I do variable bitrate 2-pass, and then I just choose target bitrate. This is about 13, and then generally how much time I have on my hands and how much time I need to render for YouTube. I can push this all the way up to 20 if I want to, but generally you don't need to. Render at maximum render quality. For audio, AAC, 48,000 hertz. Stereo, of course you want high quality audio, and everything's looking good, and then I'll just hit export. And if you're rendering for DVD, I would do MPEG to DVD, of course 100% quality, 23.976, 16:9, NTSC, maximum depth, variable bitrate 2-pass. Generally keep this where it is. I might move this up a little just for more quality. Maximum render quality, and of course these are going to be rendered as 2 different things. And do not do PCM. I mean, you can, but I would recommend dual by digital and 16-bit, best quality, and you are good to go. And you hit export, and then you can go into Adobe Encore or Sony DVD Architect and burn it onto a DVD and show all of your friends. So that is it for part 2, guys. I know this has been a really long tutorial. If you're still watching right now, thank you very much. I know this has been very long, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you for watching How to Achieve Cinematic Color Grading for Your Films. If you'd like to be notified of part 3, feel free to subscribe. If you have any more questions, feel free to follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Thank you again for watching.